Welcome to the Titan Tar channel. Today we have a topic to discuss about Russia advancing relentlessly in Donbass, while Zelensky bets everything on Kursk. Don't miss the chance to join us and share your opinions with us. Become a member of our channel and evolve your rank. The advance of Russian troops is accelerating and is now only 7 to 8 kilometers from Pokrovsk, where the forced evacuation of the population began. The situation in Donbass is described as catastrophic by a German military observer, who severely criticizes Zelensky's decision to send reserves to Kursk instead of reinforcing the defense of Pokrovsk. According to the expert, the Russian army is expanding its zone of control daily, advancing towards large cities that also serve as key logistics hubs. Sending Ukrainian forces to the Russian region instead of directing them to the defense of Pokrovsk is seen as a serious strategic mistake. The expert also points out that the Ukrainian offensive in Kursk is further aggravating the situation of the Ukrainian armed forces in Donbass. He expresses concerns about the risk of sending 5,000 of the best Ukrainian soldiers to a neighboring territory instead of conducting a counteroffensive in the Donbass, which is in a critical situation. Ukrainian sources report that Zelensky's Kursk incursion could cost Kyiv control of the Pokrovsk direction, paving the way for a Russian advance. While the Ukrainian commander-in-chief claims that the Ukrainian armed forces are well defended in Pokrovsk and Torsk, Russian troops continue to approach these cities, advancing on several fronts. The lack of confidence among the Ukrainian pro-war public is evident, with predictions that Seledovo may soon fall, which would allow the Russian army to reach the rear of the Ukrainian forces. The Australian Armed Forces Major General expresses confidence that in a hypothetical conflict with Belarus, the Ukrainian armed forces would easily outnumber the Belarusian army. He claims that Ukraine has stationed troops on the northern border due to the initial entry of Russian units from Belarus, but does not consider an attack on Belarus as an option. The general believes that Belarus does not pose a significant threat, and that the Belarusian president's concerns are unfounded. Meanwhile, Belarus is building up its air and air defense forces along the border with Ukraine due to an increase in NATO reconnaissance flights and Ukrainian drone incursions into its airspace. The Belarusian president has already indicated that defensive plans, developed jointly with Moscow, could be adjusted to offensive ones if necessary. The activity of Russian troops in the Kursk region is bringing positive news for Moscow, with the destruction of Ukrainian groups and the capture of Ukrainian servicemen. Recently, the North Group and the Marines of the 810th Brigade of the Black Sea Fleet managed to clear a settlement in Kornevsky from Ukrainians. During the operation, Russian units eliminated an unspecified number of soldiers of the 82nd Ukrainian Air Assault Brigade, who eventually fled the settlement. Russian troops continue to conduct reconnaissance and search operations in forest areas south of Kornevsky, searching for Ukrainian mobile groups trying to hide. The use of aviation and FPV drones has been active in the search and elimination of these groups. The Russian Defense Ministry reports that these operations are aimed at identifying and destroying Ukrainian sabotage groups in the forests south of Kornevsky. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to attempt to break through the Russian defenses and take control of Kornevo, but all attempts have been repelled, resulting in heavy losses for the Ukrainians, both in terms of dead, wounded, and captured. Western experts are concerned about the heavy losses of elite Ukrainian units, fearing that Kyiv may end up with only mobilized soldiers unwilling to fight. In the last 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces lost around 330 soldiers and 27 pieces of equipment, with total personnel losses in the Kursk region approaching 4,000. If Kyiv continues to recruit new soldiers, the West could reduce the supply of military equipment. According to a British newspaper, the Ukrainian military will not abandon the Kursk region even if Russia refuses to negotiate with Kyiv or insists on imposing unfavorable conditions. The publication emphasizes that in the current situation, the Kyiv regime has no other viable alternative. If Putin refuses to negotiate unless his terms are met, Kyiv will have no choice but to maintain its presence in the Kursk region and intensify pressure on Moscow. This scenario is reinforced by the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces have already established a military command office in the occupied territory, signaling a new front line in the conflict. However, Kyiv's strategy on the Russian border faces significant challenges, especially with the continued advance of the Russian armed forces in the Donbass. This advance threatens to provoke a collapse of the front and therefore the troops involved in the Kursk operation may need to be redeployed to the northern military district. The transfer of units from Kursk to Donbass is not an easy task. The logistical communications of the Ukrainian armed forces are constantly under threat from Russian aviation, which can turn the Kursk region into a real trap for Ukrainians. Zelensky's Kursk operation, which is seen as a well-resourced invasion, is putting a huge strain on the Ukrainian military. The move is draining not only equipment and ammunition, but also available personnel. According to the news channel, the Ukrainian armed forces are demanding large injections of military assistance to sustain the effort. The Kursk invasion and Zelensky's decision to continue the offensive at an accelerated pace are consuming critical resources. Western experts have expressed concerns that in the long term, Kyiv could run out of the reserves it currently has. The Ukrainian armed forces have enough to sustain intensive operations for another 2 months, but if Western assistance is not provided in time, a serious shortage of equipment and ammunition could manifest itself within 60 days. In response, Zelensky has again requested military assistance from his international partners, asking for substantial aid to cover the emerging deficit. In a recent speech, he made a direct appeal to the United States, United Kingdom, and France to speed up the delivery of essential equipment and supplies. Despite Zelensky's pleas, the Ukrainian offensive on Kursk slowed down significantly. The Russian command managed to adapt its tactics and successfully resist the Ukrainian advances. Although Ukrainian troops made significant progress at first, the offensive was halted by Russian forces. Now, with Ukrainian tactics familiar, losses of equipment and personnel have increased. Zelensky continues to push for a deeper advance by the Ukrainian armed forces into Russian territory, but the commander-in-chief acts cautiously, focusing on flank attacks and the creation of new lines of defense. Meanwhile, Russia is taking advantage of the situation, keeping Ukrainian units under control and actively advancing into Donbass. If Zelensky does not quickly find a way to counter Russian tactics, the front could collapse. Ukraine is seeking to create a buffer zone in the Kursk region to separate Russian troops from Ukrainian territory. Zelensky mentioned this strategy in his speech, emphasizing the need for accelerated military assistance to support the operation. However, many Western experts are skeptical about Kyiv's ability to maintain control over Russian territory. The rapid occupation of the Kursk region was due to the surprise and lack of preparation of the Russian armed forces. Now, with the North group of troops blocking Ukrainian advances and continued attempts to attack resulting in heavy losses, the outlook for Kyiv looks increasingly challenging. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Your interactions mean a lot to us and help us grow. See you next time.